Okay, I left part of this to the robots. Okay, and here's the part I left to the robots.
Episode 215.
Which might be able to convince someone who says they dislike Zappa's music without having heard Zappa's music. Play them the songs from this chapter, and you might convince them to like Zappa's music. Songs on this part of the list might even surprise a casual fan because they are, for the most part, inoffensive and more like normal music, whatever that means. Note 2. The second chapter of this playlist contains songs that would almost definitely offend the faint of heart or overly sensitive. Frank Zappa was an extremely demanding band leader whose work stands close to the forefront of avant-garde musical explorations. The massive amount of music he wrote, performed, recorded, and released includes the broadest spectrum of genres imaginable. Mr. Zappa was also an outspoken advocate for First Amendment rights. He took our freedom of speech very seriously. In fact, if children whose parents noticed their own children using some of the language and or imagery contained in Zappa's lyrics, those children might get their mouths washed out with soap, after which, in our current social/political climate, the children would probably call 911. Even though Zappa usually intended the obscenity, vulgarity, and profanity to be satirical and or humorous, neither the angry parents, fingerprints on the bar of dial or Irish Spring, or the arriving SWAT team would see the humor. Based upon their use of force, with the soap, the parents would go to jail and the children would wind up in foster homes, reach 18 years of age, and be cast out onto the streets of Los Angeles or Detroit or Fresno where they would subsist on tiny cans of Vienna sausages, stolen from local grocery stores, and goldfish, stolen from local pet shops.
Note 3. Neither of these two chapters is intended to be comprehensive.
For those who find the text on this playlist to be way too small, I've included binoculars for your convenience.
Okay, if you have trouble reading, you could use the binoculars that I've included on the page here. Hang on a second. And what I did was I just created two chapters. One playlist is for people who know somebody who has no justifiable reason for disliking Frank Zappa. Now, he does have some really interesting music that would be classified as sort of normal. I mean, whatever that means, okay? It's pleasant to listen to. It's not obscene or vulgar. It's not a bunch of chaotic sounds altogether. But you know what? For the people who like that part, that's why I have the list on chapter 2. So, you know, you can go just about any way you want to go with Frank Zappa's music, from the old 50s doo-wop stuff to totally classical music, as in his performance with the London Symphony Orchestra, or the album that's called Francesco Zappa. So let me show you the lists if I can get them to pull up here. Here we go. Okay. Now, the chapter 1 list. I really like Joe's Garage. I really like that album. It's a concept album about somebody who's gotten into the dangerous field of rock and roll music, okay? These two songs, Lucille Has Messed My Mind Up. It is a plaintive, heartfelt ballad. It's just a great song. And then Watermelon and Easter Hay is an instrumental. And it is about as plaintive and poignant as any other music I've ever heard. It's really emotional. You Are What You Is came out in 1981. Doreen, I don't know if you've heard that song, but the harmonies in that song are great. It's a more of a hard driving song, as Fred would say. Cruising with Ruben and the Jets is one of my favorite Zappa albums, and that's kind of done in a sort of an East LA, sort of a doo-wop thing, you know. And the songs on there that I think most people would like and probably wouldn't even realize it's Frank Zappa, The Mothers of Invention, are listed there. Anything and Stuff Up the Cracks. One Size Fits All. Sofa Number 1 is a piano dominant instrumental. There's also Sofa Number 2 on the same album, in which most of the lyrics are in German. And when you translate those lyrics, I don't have a translation handy now. It's just a really good example of how nonsensical and fun Frank Zappa could be with just language. Them or Us. This album is really interesting to me because it has extremes on both ends of the spectrum. We have The Closer You Are and Charlene, romantic ballads. And on the other side of that coin, if you look at the chapter 2 listing there for Them or Us, 1984 album. In France, Baby Take Your Teeth Out, totally obscene, vulgar, and funny. Okay. Broadway the Hard Way. Oh, wait. Wacka Jawacka. I think that was the first Zappa album that really caught my attention. Those two songs, Big Swifty and Wacka Jawacka, they're lengthy. Okay. Don Campbell likes those kinds of lengthy songs. These songs are a combination of jazz, country, western, rock and roll, you name it, and it's in there on both of these. I've also included, I think included another song on the other side, but I'll get to that. Shut Up and Play Your Guitar. I don't know if you've heard this song, 9 minutes and 8 seconds, Stucco Homes. It's just beautiful. It's just a really nice it's a nice composition, pleasant to listen to. Nothing to offend anyone in there, okay? Same with Blessed Relief on the Grand Wazoo. And one of the things that you'll find if you really get into Zappa's recordings, he was absolutely obsessive about recording his performances, whether they were in the studio or they were live performances. He mixed both kinds of performances together. A lot of times his studio albums contained snippets from his live performances, okay? And then he came out with albums that you'll see duplicates, actually remixes of previous songs all throughout his catalog. Francesco Zappa, this is a classical music album, okay? There's just no other way to describe it. It's beautiful. It's all instrumental, and it's you might as well be sitting in Italy in a big freaking concert hall that's 700 years old, I mean, with a classical composer and an orchestra leader at the front of the band, man. On chapter 2, I have a real interesting history with Freak Out. Help, I'm a Rock. I used to have, I went to Cal Poly Pomona, and Cal Poly Pomona is pretty close to Mount Baldy. You go up to Mount Baldy and through the city of Claremont and Upland, and you'll see a lot of work project construction that was done in the 30s and 40s, right after the Depression, where people needed to work, and they used native materials for the curbsides and building houses and stuff. So I had, in the middle of my house when I was in college, I had a big boulder that it took 3 of us to lift it in there. So the message on the boulder was "Help, I'm a Rock," and nobody did anything to help it. That was just a development there. The Return of the Son of Monster Magnet. If you want to annoy your neighbors, put that on and turn it up, okay? You Are What You Is also contains a really funny song called Harder Than Your Husband, and it's exactly what you think it is. Shake Your Booty, a really, really offensive and totally funny song, Jewish Princess. Have you heard that? Anybody raise your hand?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Sandblasted Zits, and never mind, I won't finish that. Overnight Sensation. This is about the time when all of the movements for censorship in rock and roll records was starting to gain steam with Tipper Gore and that whole 9 yards of stuff. And this is where Frank Zappa really, he shined, he testified before Congress, and his whole question about the obscenity issues, what damage does it do? In fact, he was going through some of the same things as a lot of rock stars were, as Lenny Bruce went through during the 50s with his comedy acts, it became an issue. To this day, it's pretty interesting what we hear on television on a daily basis that would have gotten somebody arrested in Lenny Bruce's day. So things do change over time. And speaking of foul, the Illinois Enema Bandit, I think, based on a true story. And the thing that cracks me up about this number is the narration by Don Pardo. Okay. Famous game show announcer, used to work at Saturday Night Live, I think.
Yeah.
Jeopardy.
Yep, Jeopardy. That's right. Thank you, Don Pardo. Thank you, friends. And we're here to play Jeopardy. Alex Trebek. Them or Us, another couple of cuts from there. Baby, Take Your Teeth Out. In France, I can't even quote. I can't think of any lines that I can quote and not wonder if my grandmother would slap me in the head, Holy cow. And then we got another one of my very favorite Zappa albums, and that's Just Another Band from LA. Now, Billy the Mountain, in and of itself, isn't as foul or obscenity laced as some of his other stuff. There are a couple of parts in there where the main character, Studebaker Hawk, goes into a phone booth. I don't know if you remember this, and the way he gets the phone booth, he gets the phone booth to fly up into the air. And I'm not going to go into the details. You'll have to figure that one out for yourself, how he manages to get the phone booth to fly. But one of the most foul and funny songs, and you know, women's rights activists, they probably hate this song, Magdalena. They're little men who lived in Montreal. Okay, so, and then I think in terms of music that you might play to annoy the neighbors, the entire album of 200 Motels would probably work really well. And then Joe's Garage, which contains some beautiful music, also has some stuff that's pretty funny. But within the context of the story that he's trying to tell in this concept album, it's another example, 1979, of how this is a response to the Tipper Gore thing with the labeling of obscenity, vulgarity, and profanity. What harm does that really do? I don't know. And then the best band you never heard, real jazzy sometimes, real loud and hard rock and music sometimes. But the story that he tells before it's a live album, the story that he tells about running into Johnny Cash at the concert venue the night before is really funny. And apparently Johnny Cash had agreed to come onto the stage and play with Zappa's band, which I would have loved to have seen that. And the version of Ring of Fire that's on this album is awesome. It's awesome. There's another couple of songs in there. There's a cover of Purple Haze on there that's not what you think, because he starts talking about Woody Hayes and Helen Hayes and Gabby Hayes, you know. So obviously, you probably got the idea that Frank Zappa is one of my very favorites. Just music that I think is worth listening to because it is so off and out of the mainstream.
Yeah. Okay. A couple of quick comments.
Yeah,
Nemeros includes an amazing version of Whipping Post.
it does. It does. And I forget which album it is. I think it might be The Best Band You Never Heard has Stairway to Heaven on it too.
Yeah, I think that, I think that is the best
Is
band
it,
I've ever heard.
he also does a version of Whipping Post that he calls Whipping Floss, which is a takeoff from Montana. You know, I mean, there was one of the things that
Going
inspired
to
me to do
Montana
this.
soon.
Yeah, going to be a dental floss tycoon. One of the things that inspired me to do this was I was looking at some YouTube videos, and it was David Letterman interviewing Frank Zappa and his daughter Moon Unit after the release of Valley Girl.
Okay.
You know, and I think Zappa is just infinitely interesting as a person. He would be the type of person that would be fun to like meet him, you know, like run into him at a coffee shop or something like that. I'd probably annoy the shit out of him, but that would be okay.
Well, the other thing I was going to mention, speaking of splicing stuff together, have you listened to any of the You Can't Do That on Stage Anymore CDs?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have a couple of those left. I'm missing a couple of them, but I have number 4, and I think I have number 3 also. But those are great.
Yeah, and he took live clips from his entire career and spliced them together into a coherent flow of music.
Yeah, and you know what else? His family has been releasing some of the studio recordings that he didn't release when he was alive.
Okay.
You know, so I don't know what was I forget which country it was, but one of the European countries. He was not just famous as a musician. I think they wanted him to run for president. I mean, and that was not a joke, you know.
I think it might have been
I
Czechoslovakia.
was thinking that too. It might have been Czechoslovakia.
Václav Havel, who did become president, was a huge Zappa fan.
Really, really.
Yeah. Well, going back into the 60s, when they were, especially like when the Soviets invaded Czechoslovakia, they looked up to Zappa as, like you say, this proponent of freedom. And
Oh yeah. That's another thing about him that, you know, there's a guy who you wouldn't want to coerce into conformity. There's just no way. I don't see any way that could happen. You know, but I did hear that as a band leader, he was really strict.
Oh yeah.
You know, I saw him in concert twice. And to see that band perform live was really incredible. I mean, Ruth Underwood was amazing. Napoleon Murphy Brock, George Duke, those guys are incredible. And if you listen to some of the horn solos in some of his music, where you have not Jack Bruce, what's his name? Can't remember the horn player's name right off the top of my head, but all of those musicians, there's a difference between musicians who are trying to be funny and musicians who are really competent musicians that are funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if somebody's just trying to be funny and they can't play the instrument, they just look like an idiot. But man,
I saw Zappa around the time of We're Only in It for the Money.
wow, early.
I was in Greenwich Village in 1966. I came down from Cape Cod and spent 2 days walking around on the streets and hanging out in coffee houses. And I had seen the Fugs the night before.
Oh, wow.
In the East
Kill for
Village.
Peace.
And came across this record store, and Freak Out was in the window, the album. And I thought, who the hell is that? I had no idea. I bought the album. Turns out it's a 2-record set, and I brought it back to Cape Cod, and my friends and I listened to it over and over again.
Yeah, I love that album.
Believe it.
I love that album. That's a great album. You were talking about being in New York. Oh, I lost it there. Oh, I know what I was going to say. One of my favorite parts about Just Another Band from LA on Billy the Mountain, he paired up with Flo and Eddie, the Turtles, for several albums. And you hear their regular pop music, and then you hear them with Zappa, and you go, these guys are pretty good. These guys are funny, versatile, and the idea that they could perform to his standard was, I mean, that's pretty amazing to me.
Yeah.
Ruth Underwood, if you ever get a chance to see her interviewed, there's a documentary where she is interviewed along with several of the drummers that played with Zappa, and they provide some really cool insights as to what it was like to be.
Yeah. One of my favorite Zappa moments is on the Live at the Fillmore East album, where Flo and Eddie break into Happy Together.
Oh yeah, that's hilarious.
This huge routine about groupies, and
because of the Zappa connection, Flo and Eddie recorded a couple of albums for Warner Brothers as Flo and Eddie.
Yeah. The Fluorescent
pretty good.
Eddie. Yeah. Those guys are great.
I used to listen to the Flo and Eddie show on K-Rock.
Oh, I forgot about that. That's right. And George Duke is an incredible keyboardist. Napoleon Murphy Brock, I got to see him with the band and George Duke at the Santa Monica Civic. And I think it was about 1975 or so. And then I got to see the band again. They were on the Bongo Fury tour with Captain Beefheart.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And I saw them at the Little Bridges Auditorium in Claremont, California, the Claremont Colleges. Captain Beefheart played and sang with the band for the first part of the concert. And then he just left, and he came back with his easel and paints, and he was painting on the stage while the band played music. It was great. It was awesome.
Oh boy.
Small venue too.
Well, Don, you might need to cut us off because we can apparently talk about Zappa for hours.
Yep.
Stop the screen share, and we can thank you in regular video size.
There we go. Stop the share. There we go.
Here you go.
Thanks for tolerating the length.
And that's the Zappa report.
Man.